Today we're talking about a one-eyed, one-gun purple people killer. Today is all about one of Cobra's heavy machine gunners, Overkill, the Saw Viper. First, it must be said that there are many Saw Vipers in the ranks of the Cobra organization. These are the machine gunners for Cobra, carrying both LMGs and HMGs like M60s and M249s and other force-multiplying weaponry and squad automatic weapons in their loadouts and arsenals. Saw Vipers coordinate with maneuver and infantry elements along with ranged equipment like Aspen placements to provide suppressive fire and fire support to the rest of their squad or platoon. Per some sources, the Saw Vipers were almost called Claw Vipers, which would have stood for Cobra Light Automatic Weapons. Instead, that acronym was reserved for the Cobra Covert Light Aerial Weapon, a one-man battle wing sold in 1984 and beyond. As noted in file cards, Saw Vipers are equipped with a gyro-stabilized, cryogenically cooled mini chain gun, scoped with an infrared night vision, auto-ranging optical sighting system that also has flash and sound suppressors equipped. It makes them incredibly accurate, and with the cooling, they can put a ton of rounds on target rapidly without worrying about burning out the barrel. In pitch darkness, a Saw Viper can take out a flea 100 yards away in heavy brush. In other words, you'll feel the bullets before you see them coming. But that weaponry differs a bit from what we actually see in the comic book form. Speaking of which, the first time we meet the Saw Viper in comic book form is with issue 109. This was at the time when the Crimson Twins were with an army in a country called Trucial Abysmia, installing terrordromes, which is where they wound up in a battle with G.I. Joe. A team of Joes were captured by Tomax and Xamot, and to prove their point, they ended up beating Duke up brutally in front of Falcon, Cross Country, and the others in their unit. They then shoved, pushed, and kicked the Joe team into a nearby ditch while Xamot used a televiper to call Cobra Commander at the Cobra Consulate building in New York City. He wanted to ask Cobra Commander what they should do with the prisoners. Cobra Commander said, "Get rid of them immediately." Xamot was shocked, interpreting that as kill them, when in actuality, Cobra Commander just wanted them to cut the Joes loose so as not to unleash their wrath on Cobra even more by inspiring a personal grudge. Tomax and Xamot then immediately began thinking about how to comply with Cobra Commander's orders but not get their own hands dirty. So they called over a nest of nasty Vipers. None of the Vipers wanted to murder the Joes trapped in the ditch. That is, until a purple Saw Viper, bogarting a cigarette, walked up, machine gun resting on his shoulder, and said he would do it as long as he got a pay bonus. His bonus ended up being 2 months extra pay. They also left Saw Viper with a rage tank and 2 Vipers to help him out. The Crimson Twins told him to make it quick and to catch up with the rest of the main column. As the G.I. Joes in the ditch heard the mechanized Cobra war machines rolling out, Doc peered over the edge of the ditch to get line of sight on the Cobra movement. Instead, he got a face full of M60 on full auto. Doc fell backward into a pool of his own blood as smoke still wafted from the barrel of Saw Viper's gun. He then unleashed a nasty burst from the same weapon on the helpless and trapped G.I. Joes. Saw Viper only took his finger off the trigger when Lieutenant Falcon threw the combat knife that Cross Country stole off a Viper at him. In that hail of bullets, Thunder, Crankcase, and Heavy Metal were killed in action as they bravely and selflessly shielded their battle buddies with their own bodies. When Falcon threw the knife, it caused Saw Viper to stumble backwards, enough that Falcon climbed out, knocked the gun from his hands, and took the Saw Viper to the dirt. And this just as he was shot in the bicep by Saw Viper's assistant Vipers. Then, overcome with grief and agony, Quick Kick also climbed out, grabbed the hog, and emptied it, unleashing its fury as hot lead, turning those 2 Vipers into Swiss cheese as tears streamed down his face. As some of the Joes collected their fallen comrades, Breaker used the comms in the nearby rage tank to call for help. Tomax and Xamot, with the main Cobra element now, intercepted then jammed the distress call and ordered a pair of his 2 tanks, a maggot tank, and 2 fangs to break off and assist the Saw Viper. The Joes on the rage tank took off as Saw Viper regained consciousness, pulled the knife from his chest armor, and slowly got back to his feet. He was alive, but pissed off that his nose was now broken. As the Fang helicopters strafed the rage tank, Breaker was hit and wounded. So Duke took out both Fangs with 1 shot from the rage tank. The tanks caught up with the Joes, as did the Saw Viper, who now had a fresh ammo pack and a new belt fed right into his pig. A G.I. Joe extraction team was inbound as the Saw Viper and the tanks continued to close on the Joe's position, made more dire when a direct hit blew up the tank. Only Falcon, Duke, and Cross Country made it out of that burning hot wreckage alive. Crazy Legs, Quick Kick, and Breaker were among those killed in the blast. The Saw Viper saw them and chuckled, vowing to finish off the remaining 3. The The three Joes appeared for a last stand against the Saw Viper, ready to die on their feet with honor. At the same time, Cobra Commander spoke with Tomax and said he hoped they escorted the Joes to a neutral border safely and let them go, reiterating that he did not want to create a personal grudge. Back on the ground, the G.I. Joe trio let their last rounds loose, pinging them off of the Cobra tank while Saw Viper fired back while saying, "I may be following orders, but there's no reason why I can't enjoy myself while doing so." A vile comment that says a lot about the Saw Viper. Just then, a Televiper called in frantically, telling him to disengage. Saw Viper said that the Joes were in his sight, and just one more pull of the trigger would mean that they were dead. So the Crimson Twin said to comply, or he'd go and shove that big gun down his throat sideways. When the Saw Viper and the other Vipers turned their tanks around, Duke fired a shot, and the bullet hit the Saw Viper, ricocheted off his helmet. Duke vowed to put the Saw Viper in the dirt, and the Saw Viper said that he would be waiting for that, and that would be his chance to send Duke to the same place he sent the other deceased Joes. Later, Tomax and Xamon had to tell Cobra Commander what happened, blaming it on a subordinate who superseded his authority, and that 7 G.I. Joes were shot. And at this, Cobra Commander was appalled. Not long after that, the SV sat atop a tank and cleaned his pig with a toothbrush and a cloth, all while carrying on about how he'd wished the Joes kept coming so he could keep shooting them. Saw Viper got his wish when a mobile battle bunker showed up on a nearby ridge and blew his Hiss-2 tank apart with a well-placed round. The Saw Viper jumped on another Hiss-2 and they engaged in a close-range tank battle. The mobile battle bunker destroyed the second Hiss-2 and blew the Saw Viper clear of the wreckage. Duke then stood atop the Saw Viper, goading him on, wanting him to grab his weapon so Duke could shoot him. But the Saw Viper didn't, and they were not supposed to be in country anyway, so Duke's hands were tied and he ended up walking away while the Saw Viper laughed out loud. After Tomax and Xamon's army took control of the Emirate of Benzene, Cobra Commander landed to take over operational control, and as he stepped off the helo, the Saw Viper showed up and the twins wasted no time blaming the Saw Viper for the fiasco. Cobra Commander started to yell at him, but Saw Viper told Cobra Commander that the Joes had it in for him since General Flag died anyway, and that he'd wasted 5 times as many Joes in one day as his entire organization had taken out in nearly a decade. It was enough for Cobra Commander to then say the Saw Viper needed a medal and a party. Suddenly, the Crimson Twins wanted credit for the deaths. When Ninja Force was dropped behind Cobra lines for recon, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow peered through a skylight on the roof of the Emir's palace and saw the Saw Viper with a stripper and a bottle of champagne dancing and celebrating while Cobra Commander, Tomax, Xamon, and some other ladies of the night looked on. Snake Eyes saw that and wanted to kill the Saw Viper right there, so his team had to talk him down and remind him of their op-ord and to focus on their objective. The Saw Viper even showed the dancer with him how he had killed the Joes by shooting a row of bottles right off the counter, right off the bar counter. He said, "One difference is the bottles don't twitch. This guy is as evil as they come." Later, still drunk on his own ego, the Saw Viper overheard Tomax and Xamon talking about a G.I. Joe infiltration team that could be in Benzene, so Saw Viper said, "Let me at him." The Saw Viper was about to be dropped from a chopper near the G.I. Joe infiltration team, but Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow saw him and attacked. They killed him and set the helicopter up to look like a crash. They took him out thinking they killed him and set the helicopter up to look like a crash. Later, they were able to tell Hawk that for what it was worth, their fallen Joes were avenged. This Saw Viper apparently was dead. But because there's many Saw Vipers showed up again a few issues later when Cobra Commander once again assaulted the pit along with an army of Cobra Vipers, Heat Vipers, and Frag Vipers. A fragmentation grenade that Spirit hid under a rug killed the tip of the Cobra spear. And when they died, Cobra Commander sent in an army of Heat Vipers, Night Vipers, Flak Vipers, Alley Vipers, Laser Vipers, and new improved Battle Android Trooper models. Many years later, after IDW Publishing picked up the numbering on the Homoverse where Marvel Comics left off, we see another Saw Viper in Darklonia flanking the Baroness along with a Frag Viper. Baroness shot a sniper named Katya, and this Saw Viper stayed with her while she went up to the bell tower to confirm the kill. But Katya was gone. In issue 285, a G.I. Joe team was in Amarawapur in Southeast Asia, tracking down a guy named Cobra. After they fought their way into the facility in the jungle, they ran into Cobra, but also a guy named Overkill. Overkill led his army of bats and ordered them to load into the Aspid transport helicopters instead of fighting the G.I. Joe team. Cobra was mad and tried to shoot Overkill, but he was saved by the metal implants embedded in his skull. So who is Overkill? In the second volume of G.I. Joe by Image Comics and Devil's Due Publishing, we meet Saw Viper once more. This was at the time when Serpentor, his general named Overlord, explode, and their cult army called the Coil had risen to power from Cobra Island. Serpentor was actively recruiting, and it was here that we learned that Marvel-era Saw Viper's name was Robert Skelton, and he was responsible for the deaths of all the G.I. Joes in that Battle of Benzene. Skelton had narrowly survived the attack by Snake Eyes and was now working as an assassin in Italy when Serpentor's forces hunted him down to bring him before Serpentor. They successfully captured him, but 4 out of 10 of Serpentor's men died in the attempt. Serpentor then offered Skelton a new job. He said he wanted him to join his cult. Skelton agreed, donned an all-black uniform that was similar to his Saw Viper days, just not purple, and also took on the name Overkill, a name meant to harken back to his high G.I. Joe kill count. Overkill then led a group of the Coil as they pushed back against the G.I. Joe assault force on Cobra Island. He found Hawk and attacked him, nearly choking him out before Kamakura showed up. The Green Power Ranger put a hole in the back of Skelton's head with a single round fired from his sidearm. Overkill wasn't quite dead yet. He found his way onto Cobra Commander's submarine and, blood spilling from his mouth, collapsed face down on the metal floor, his last bit of energy expended in his greedy quest for power. A few issues later, we see that Cobra had actually kept Overkill alive. Instead of letting him lose his life, he was turned over to Cobra scientists and bioweapons specialists and made into a cyborg. Overkill was covered in bandages and tubes as he broke out of a bionics lab aboard a massive transport plane. Overkill attacked a female scientist, and so the lead scientist had to cut off the arm he'd used to choke the female scientists and to replace it with a biomechanical one. Their flight to Bodixstan would be enough time to install the required software for the bioweapon system in his replacement arm. Based on file card information, Overkill is now only partly human, with over 50% of his body replaced with mechanical parts, along with numerous mechanical and computer upgrades like an internal targeting system for its claw arm, or built-in forearm missiles and guns, or the voice synthesizer that Cobra Commander specifically requested in order for him to repeat demoralizing slogans at deafening volumes. And with that, his humanity was gone too, and he had no qualms about undergoing evil operations and leading legions of bats into battle. So later, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Falcon, Dusty, and Claymore were at the border of Bodixstan to monitor the Coil's activity in the area when they ran into the new, upgraded, and even more deadly Overkill. At one point, he leapt onto Claymore's stand razor, and Claymore crashed hard. Falcon and Dusty recognized him, even as they were taken into Cobra custody. Overkill nearly choked Claymore out until Snake Eyes and Scarlet attacked him. Overkill went down when Scarlet shot him in the back, and he immediately began short-circuiting. As sparks flew and wires burned, Overkill looked at Snake Eyes and managed to tell him that he knew it was him who got to him in the helicopter back in Trucial Abysmia and tried to laugh, saying he tried to get revenge for his friends, but that he was too tough. He begged Snake Eyes, though, to kill him slowly, to make it hurt and to get his money's worth. He said kill him and don't make him live like that anymore. That was enough for Snake Eyes to plunge his knife into the sand next to Overkill's face and walk away. In the America's Elite series, it is confirmed in the G.I. Joe Threat Matrix that Overkill was actually still alive, but now in custody. In another issue, we learned that another from the Saw Viper program was converted into Gallows and put on the Cobra Elite Death Squad called the Plague. Then right after this, we get confirmation on a computer screen that Overkill was confirmed terminated, considered a loose end, and taken out when Major Blood and Tomax invaded the prison called the Coffin. Overkill the Saw Viper was now dead. Overkill also showed up in the comic book version of G.I. Joe Sigma 6, a series created to complement the Sigma 6 animation where Overkill was voiced by Madeline Blaustein, and then voiced by Dale Wilson. He appeared in the Deke animated series that followed the Sunbow season. In the Granny Dearest episode, Saw Vipers were at Cobra's base when Metalhead and Nagahide were arguing in front of Metalhead's grandmother. They then used water hoses to knock the G.I. Joes off the top of a maglev train. In that same episode, Freefall donned a Saw Viper uniform to penetrate a Cobra base. In Victory at Volcania, the Saw Vipers were driving Dominators and Rage Tanks in their assault on the G.I. Joe R&R Center. In Ozone Conspiracy, we see Saw Vipers still in a Dominator, but by the time we get to the Pigskin Commandos episode, Saw Vipers are now driving Hammerheads and Hurricanes. We see Saw Viper again in Injustice in the Cobra Way, where they're guarding the president in the sewer. In I Found You, Eevee, the Saw Vipers were with the Rage Vipers, fighting for Cobra near the site of the crash of Sergeant Slaughter's Tomahawk helicopter. An episode called The Eliminator is where we learned how Cobra Commander's bats used to be a lot more advanced with the Eliminator chip upgrades, and that there was one called Overkill, and Overkill ended up commanding his bat force. In the Sword episode, Overkill went to get the Sword of Light from the head of the Night Creepers called, unsurprisingly, Creeper Leader. Then in an episode about El Dorado, Overkill became obsessed by the spirit of Commander Fernando Pizarro. The Saw Viper's first action figure came in the beginning of the 1990s decade. In 91, he was part of the Talking Battle Commanders line as Overkill, along with Cobra Commander, General Hawk, and Stalker. At this point, Overkill was still separate from Saw Viper, noted here as the leader of the Battle Android Troopers. 2003 Python Patrol Saw Viper was carded in a Toys R Us exclusive box set. This was a repainted version of his original figure. In 2003, as Overkill, he was carded in a 2-pack with Tunnel Rat for the Spy Troops line, then another 2-pack with Shipwreck, and yet another in the summer of 03 as an online exclusive with Cobra Bats and a couple Inferno Battle Android Troopers. In 04, Overkill was carded with General Abernathy for Valor vs. Venom, and the following year another 2-pack for the same line, but that time with Duke. 2006 Saw Viper was a direct-to-consumer offering. 2013 gave us the Nocturnal Fire Saw Viper. This one was exclusive to the G.I. Joe Collectors Club at the convention that year. In 2015, Saw Viper was part of the Cobra Legion's 3-pack for the 50th anniversary line, and in 2018's Python Patrol Machine Gunner Saw Viper was an exclusive to JoeCon for that year. And with that, that's a wrap on this one, my friends. Thanks for watching. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.